Hi, Frank.
Hi, good to be here.
Lovely. Thank you for taking time for this podcast interview.
My pleasure.
Lovely. Let's start with the early inspiration. What drew you, Frank, to this world of film direction and television production?
Well, I'm a local guy. I grew up 6 miles from here in Norton-on-Tees. And the top of my street, there were 2 cinemas. One was called the Cinema, and one was called the Modern. And as a young kid, from the age of 8 onwards, I would go to the cinema 3 or 4 times a week, mostly secretly, because my mother would not allow it. But so I saw hundreds and hundreds of films by the time I was 12 years old. And I didn't realize that I was destined for a film life. Being from a very small town, an industrial area, I never imagined that I could work in cinema, I could work in television or film. It seemed impossible. But my inspiration was obviously there when I was young.
Right, fantastic. In terms of the creative process, right? So how do you do it from a raw idea to a finished product? What's your way of working on the creative process?
Not all directors, come up with the idea. Sometimes they just take the job as like the best paid technician on the film, and I'm different. I like to have an idea. I love to have an idea, and I like to make an idea work and see it through. So it often starts with me with a simple thought. And I think Auden, the poet, when he wrote his poetry, he said sometimes one line would inspire him to write the whole poem. And I think with me sometimes it's one idea lets me into the creative process. And sometimes you have an idea and it doesn't come to anything. But later on, another part of the idea comes to you, and then maybe another part of the idea comes to you. And that certainly happened to me with when we brought back Alvideze Pet. I had like 2/3 of the puzzle for like 10 years. And it wasn't until something else clicked in that I had the whole picture, and then I was ready to move.
Right, fantastic. What do you think is a good story? How do you define a good story? I mean, in your own words, yeah.
Interesting, because when I worked in Alvideze, Ian Lafrene, the writer, his thought was, what do they want, and what stops them from getting it?
Beautiful.
And I thought, but that's not me. That's him. I'm interested in the hero's journey in a way. I'm very interested in the classic notion, whether it's Odysseus in the Odyssey or whether it's a Tarantino film. You come up against, you have a direction you want to go in. You come against an obstacle. How you respond to that obstacle, how you overcome that obstacle, and how that process almost destroys you, and then how you regain yourself and triumph in the end. So that's the kind of like the hero's journey in a way. So in that sense, I'm a bit of a romantic about stories in cinema.
Beautiful, fantastic. Frank, I wanted to ask this to television producers and directors, and both in film and television. It's a good chance I'm asking you now today. So, do you think are there any like misconceptions or myths in terms of the job that TV producers and film directors do?
Well, the thing is, there's a great difference between a producer and a director. And the way I used to, and the thing is, the producer should provide the funds for the film, and he should help manage the spending of that money so that the investors don't lose their bit. The director is normally in charge of all creative elements of the film. So if you were fortunate enough, as I was, to be a director and part of the Directors Guild of America, and we had certain privileges, and I would always choose my crew. I'm going to choose a cameraman. I will choose the locations, and normally, if possible, I would choose all the actors. So I would choose the composer, and the costume person, the makeup person, and I will discuss everything with them, and I will be like the conductor or the architect. I will be creating a vision. Sometimes in the States, when you're doing big films, and lots, spending tens and tens of millions, the studio will say who the actor has to be. And sometimes that becomes a point of conflict, or sometimes it becomes a point of agreement. And a good director in charge of all the creative activity must be very convincing. He must convince everybody that this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, and this is when we're doing it. And hopefully he will have the support of a good producer. But the producer doesn't normally make the creative decisions. So that's a separation. I think sometimes the public get them mixed up. In television, it's slightly different. In television, it's slightly different because sometimes the producer has a much more creative part. He may choose the director. He may choose the writer. Even he may even have had an idea for a story and said, "This is a great story. Why don't we bring in this writer to do it? And why don't we bring in this director?" But that's very different from, if there's a hierarchy for directors, then you're making a film of your own choice and controlling all the elements.
Beautiful, beautiful. I mean, you've had an amazing career so far, right? And in all three spheres, as I see, and in fact, as I said in the introduction, is a multi-talented figure, certainly in that case. But looking at films, looking at television, looking at business, if I just go back and see and ask you that what has been the standout moments in your career, and why would you think those are special? Why do they have a special significance for you?
There's a difference here. There's the events that are stand out in terms of success, what other people think of success as success, and there's standouts in what I think is success.
Yes,
and of course, the standouts for me in terms of being known or being remembered as a director, Quadrophenia, my first film, is a cult movie. And it's 45 years since we made it, and it's still being watched all over the world.
Indeed,
and it's still works for some reason. So that's a standout moment. Creating MasterChef, obviously a standout moment for different reasons, and then also creating Alvidise and Pet. But there are other films that I made that didn't get the same attention from the public or from the critics or from, whatever. But they made it very important to me. And I made an opera film called Aria, which was the closing film at the Cannes Film Festival some 25 years ago. And I think that's my most beautiful piece of work. And there were 10 directors, very famous directors like Robert Altman and Jean-Luc Godard, Ken Russell, Nick Rogan. We were all asked to direct a piece, so to choose a piece of opera from this the RCA catalogue. There's the money, do what you want. And I chose the Liebeste from Tristan Isolde by Wagner. And I shot it in Las Vegas. And I gave this young actress, Bridget Fonda, her first role. And I think that's my most beautiful piece of work. So, and then I made, films with the American Indians, the Blackfeet in Montana. And the film got tampered with. It got cut up by the brutal producer. And then I made another film, which I love that film. The American Indians, it's their favorite movie. They love it, even though it's been seen by very few people outside that community. I made a mountain climbing film called K2.
K2, yeah.
And the delightful Harvey Weinstein cut it up for a year, and we fought, almost physically sometimes. And the film that I made was only seen once. It was shown at the Cannes Film Festival, got a standing ovation for 2 or 3 minutes. Then Harvey came in and demanded we cut it. And a year later, 18 months later, it was a different film. It was like 15 minutes shorter. It didn't work so well. The music was wrong. And so, but I have a love for all the films. They're like my children, and you don't choose one child over another.
That's absolutely the right fit in terms of the analogy. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about that. There's Quadrophenia. Right?
Yes.
It's a true classic film, right? So, were there any challenges in bringing that story to life? back in time when you were?
Well, I mean, every film is a great challenge. You know, it really is. It's a huge adventure, and you know, one of the great privileges of being a film director is you're using all the art forms. You're using the narration of a fictional story, using the poetry of language, using costume and music and design, and you're putting all, and dance sometimes, you're putting all this together. So it's a great privilege to make films in general. Fantastic. Each film has its own issues and its own timing and its own. So in Quadrophenia, I was very fortunate. It was a very easy, in one respect. I was approached by the producers and they said, would you direct this film? And the money was already there. It was paid for by the record company because the Quadrophenia was based on an album by The Who. And the record company wanted to maintain this relationship with the Who, so they gave them the money to make the film. They gave me the script, and it wasn't a script. It was, a normal script is between 105 and 120 pages long. This was 230 pages, and it was written by a fan. It was not a movie script at all. But we had the money, and we were supposed to film in like 3 or 4 months later with no script. So I, with some associates of mine, I rewrote the script, was casting the film at the same time and looking for locations at the same time and finding the crew. We did the whole thing in under 4 months, which is very rare. Sometimes it takes 4 years to get things moving. Exactly. The challenge was to, you know, to motor through that. And it's so interesting, the film that we had the shortest preparation time is the film that in essence is the most successful of them. And I would say if I had any difficulty, the hardest thing was to get a young cast. I had to convince the producers, we don't want to do known actors. I want people who are 18 years old, who have never been seen before. And again, I was convincing, and it worked.
Beautiful, beautiful. I mean, this is a legacy. Fantastic. Now coming to MasterChef, right?
Yeah.
So, as the creator of MasterChef,
Yes.
right? So, what was your original vision for the show, right? And how do you feel about the global success, and it's especially with, you know, the various adaptations that you see now?
Well, first of all, how it came about. I was a 20th Century Fox. After Quadrophenia, I was invited to do the 3-picture deal at 20th Century Fox in Los Angeles. On the, there was a creative floor, the 3rd floor of this amazing building. Beautiful wide corridor, about 30 offices on each side. And each office had a filmmaker in it, a producer or a director or a writer. Some great people. And we used to gather in the corridor, and at one point there's a whole group of the American creatives like slagging off English food. Mel Brooks was like laughing, English food is this, English food is that, overcooked vegetables, and it was true. But I tried to defend English food, and I couldn't really, so I said, but in the homes, you know, they cook really well. I remember my grandmother leeks and bacon on Sunday mornings and brandy butter at Christmas, and you know, there is great food in England in the homes. And that gave me the idea for the series.
I see.
Now,
that's how it started, yeah?
So that's how it all started. Now, with all the incarnations, there are like 70 series around the world shooting. That's, you know, 70, you know, times 20. You know, see, we employ about 5,000 people worldwide. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Now, I don't direct them. I don't even produce them. I'm executive producer, and I'm the creator of the show. And they take the show and they advance it and they move it forward and they change it bit by bit with my permission. But I feel like I invented the car. You know, it may be an old banger.
Yeah.
And they can put in a radio if they want. They can put in air conditioning and even have fluffy seats. But I invented the car. So I still feel it's mine, but they are the people who make it, and they make it really well.
Yeah, fantastic. No, that's and thank you. I didn't know about that inspiration. I mean, where did you get that idea from, and you know how it all started? Fantastic. Moving to ZG Publishing, right?
Yes,
so it looks like a natural extension. I mean, of your storytelling background, right? So, what kind of stories are you passionate about bringing to life through publishing? at ZG?
Well, ZG was kind of like a whim. It's like owning a racehorse or like a yacht or something. It's going to cost you money. You're probably going to lose money in publishing. Mm-hmm. But I like the idea of giving creative people a chance. Because as a director, you're always pushing, asking for money, asking for this, asking for that. And I came across, hundreds and hundreds of people who wanted to be a writer, wanted to be an actor, wanted to do music. And people would come to me with a book and say, I need to publish this. And I thought, well, I can do that. I can publish these books for them. So I made a decision I would publish first-time authors. I'd give them their first shot. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I wouldn't do anything else with them, and they wouldn't even write another book. But I liked the idea of them having a shot. And I got lucky, again. The first book I published sold in 32 countries and made quite a bit of cash.
First book, yeah?
Yeah, and that was One for Sorrow. Yeah. And the guy worked at Sainsbury's as a manager of shelf stacking. And he wrote this book, and I published, he put all the sausages here and the beans there. And anyway, he wrote this great book, and I published it. We sold it well, and he made money. He became a full-time writer. He'd never gone back to the Sainsbury's. I made money, so it encouraged me to do the second book I published sold 300 copies, and I lost 50,000 on that one book. Mm-hmm. The third book sold now 6 million copies in total, which is The Last Templar. And that created a little treasure chest, and I could publish lots of other books. And if they didn't make money, it didn't matter. So, first-time authors, giving people a shot, that was my intention.
Idea, man. Lovely, yeah. That's quite generous, and I like the purpose of the the publishing house. That's the other side, right? But certainly, it is a tricky market, right?
Yeah.
So especially with the digital industry that we are looking at now.
Yes.
All right. So let's go a little bit to the industry side. I mean, as you're talking about that,
yes.
right? So how do you see the changes in the film and television industry? Let's say comparing it with the last 2 decades or 3 decades now, particularly with the rise of digital media and streaming platforms.
I mean, I grew up loving film, literally film. It's silver backed. You have these things called silver halides, mm-hmm. and these little silver dots on the back of a film, and what catches the light and catches the image. The larger the little bits of silver, the more blurred the film is. The more tight, the deeper the contrast, the more. So I love the notion of silver. It's on the back of mirrors too. So there's a magic thing about where you project this captured image. It's been captured on silver and chemicals. All filmmakers in my era love film, and we love the process of it and what you can do with it. When the digital cameras came in, we were resistant at first because they had limitations. In terms of, they were a bit wild when you were using for lighting. They weren't so refined. Now I feel that what is amazing is that the cameras they have now, digital are superb, and you can create amazing work, and it's much quicker and cheaper and smaller to work on digital than it is to carry. We used to carry these huge 35mm cameras around. We needed a massive amount of transportation, massive amount of lights. Now with a digital camera, you can make a film on a Canon D, and you can make a film for £50,000. And so there's a great benefit and a plus to the digital world. I'm not a great fan of all the green screen stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's great, and I've used it. Mm-hmm. But what I used to love was going out. I loved being on location, not in the studio. I loved being on a location. I loved the light and the location determining the content of the film. I felt that the film itself, the silver halides, they gave it a certain life that you don't quite get on digital. So I miss the use of real film. I applaud the new technology. I think it gives everybody the opportunity to make more films, and to have. When you do a film, when I did my first documentary for the BBC, they would give us a certain amount of film, 16 mil, in cans. And they'd say, "You're making this documentary. That's all you're getting." So you had to work out how many takes you could do, how much time you could spend on a shot, and there was no video feedback. So you weren't seeing what you were getting. Only the camera operator was seeing it, but you had to know, because of the lens you were using and because of the position of the camera and what you decided and told him what to do, it was going to work. But when I first documentary, I was given the ratio of 10 to 1. So I had 10 times more film than the length of the finished film.
I see.
Now, with run up and run out and mistakes and, people stuttering, it was very tight to make a film like that. When you have a digital, you can shoot 100 takes and it's costing you virtually nothing. It's both good and bad. We had to be very disciplined, but sometimes we wanted more takes. I love drones. I mean, I think a drone now is created. I used to fly around in helicopters, man. I would be like on mountaintops in helicopters and in quite difficult and dangerous positions. I think, what am I doing up here? And now you see these drone shots, and they've added an extra dimension to the visual world. So I think I love celluloid, but I also love the new technology.
I love the contrast that you have pictured right back from the film and the drones now, and especially with the silver light and the perspective that you beautifully described.
Yeah.
I mean it's magical in its own sense. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Brilliant. What advice would you give to aspiring film directors and television producers who are just starting out in the industry?
I mean, I think it's well known that in the film industry, persistence is very big. You have to be very persistent. Don't expect. I think when you leave film school, you just don't know what to do with yourself. You think it's going to come. It won't come to you. You have to go and get it. You have to make sure that you make all the right connections and that you persist. You have to take risks. I don't think you should try and be in the film industry as a director, say, and expect to lead a normal life. Mm-hmm. It's such a privilege that you should be prepared to sell your house, your children if necessary. You should be, because it is it's a massive thing. You can imagine something like Quadrophenia. I made this film, and 45 years later, people are still watching it and still talking about it in some places. So I always had that in mind. When I was filming, I wasn't just going, it's Saturday morning, let's get this done by lunchtime. I was going, I am making something that's going to be around forever. And I always had that approach to it, that every time you start a film, you might end up making one of the greatest films ever made. You might be, and so I think you have to approach it with that passion, and you have to approach it with that commitment. It's not just about making money or getting fame. It's an art form, and you have to be committed to that art form.
Beautiful. Yeah. And talking about the passions, I mean, are there any personal projects or passions that you're currently working on?
Yes, at the moment I've just bought the rights to a book, an American book called Booth, about John Wilkes Booth's family. John Wilkes Booth was the assassin of Abraham Lincoln. Mm-hmm. And this book is about his family, the genesis of how he got from his father through all his family to him actually taking that shot at the president. And what you see in the build-up with that family, you see America now. It's a distant mirror. You see all the problems in the States, and I think there are many problems in America now. I think it's in a very difficult position in every way. All those problems, you see the beginnings of them in this book. And so I think we'd make a brilliant 10-part series. I am in the process of trying to raise the money and find the correct writer to adapt the piece. And so in film, with books, you can take an option. Mm-hmm. So if a book's say a bestseller, a best-selling author, you may have to pay £500,000 or £1 million or even £2 million for the book rights.
Yep.
But they will give you an option where you maybe pay 10,000 for the first year and 10,000 for the second year and the third year, and then if it gets made, then the film studio will pay the £500,000 or the $1 million for the book, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that's what film development is, you know. So I am developing this series from this book, from this great author, and I'm in the early stages of it, and I'm trying to find the right partners to make this happen.
I wish you the very best with that.
Thank you.
And I mean, absolutely confident it's going to be a great production and
Let's
great
hope.
great output, right?
Yeah.
As you've always worked on, right? So thank you, Frank, for this engaging and insightful conversation. Keep inspiring us with your work.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.